You wake up before your alarm. The room is still dark. Your phone is on the nightstand charging exactly where you left it. You reach for it the way most people do, half conscious, automatic. The screen lights up in your hand. Most mornings start with social media or email or news headlines designed to spike your cortisol before your feet hit the floor. Your morning starts differently. You open your banking app first. 3 numbers: checking, savings, investments. You glance at all 3. The whole process takes maybe 20 seconds. You don't analyze, you don't stress, you don't celebrate. You just look, then you close the app and start your day. You couldn't tell anyone exactly when this became your morning ritual. It was gradual, almost unintentional. But somewhere in the last few years, those 3 numbers became part of how you see yourself. They're not just data points. They're a quiet confirmation that you're still moving in the direction you decided to move. Even on the days when nothing else feels like it's working, those numbers are still there, doing their slow work in the background. Later that morning, you'll pass a colleague at the coffee station who's complaining about being broke. The same colleague who just leased a new SUV, who flies to Vegas every other month, who orders DoorDash for lunch 4 days a week. You'll nod sympathetically and say something neutral. Inside, you'll be doing math you don't share. You know exactly what their car payment is doing to their cash flow. You know what their lifestyle is costing them in compounding terms. You don't say anything because you've learned that financial intelligence is something people have to discover for themselves. Telling someone they're sabotaging their future doesn't make them stop. It just makes them defensive. This is the part nobody talks about. Most people who are quietly building wealth don't feel like they're doing anything special. They feel like they're behind. They look at social media and see vacations they didn't take. They see houses they didn't buy. They see watches and bags and cars and lifestyles that seem to indicate everyone else has figured out something they missed. The quiet wealth builder almost always feels like an outsider in their own life. The truth is the opposite. The patterns you've quietly developed put you ahead of roughly 90% of American adults. Not because you're brilliant, because you've internalized a set of behaviors that most people never develop. According to a recent YouGov survey, 47% of Americans have no budget at all. 24% have 0 emergency savings. The personal savings rate in early 2026, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, sits at roughly 4.4%. The average household carries about $6,500 in credit card debt at 22.4% interest. The country owes $1.28 trillion on credit cards alone. You're not in those numbers. Or if you are, you're climbing out of them with intention rather than panic. Today, I'm going to walk you through 12 signs you're already financially smarter than most people, even if your bank account doesn't fully reflect it yet. Some of these will feel obvious. Others might surprise you. A few might make you uncomfortable because you'll recognize that you've been doing the smart thing all along while quietly assuming you were doing it wrong. Let's get into it. The first sign is that you check your accounts regularly without spiraling into anxiety. This sounds almost trivial until you understand how rare it actually is. Most Americans avoid their bank accounts the way some people avoid the doctor. They don't want to know. They develop sophisticated psychological mechanisms for not seeing the numbers because the numbers cause stress. The avoidance enables the very behaviors that make the numbers worse. Debt grows. Subscriptions multiply. Surprise charges go unnoticed for months. You operate differently. You look at your accounts often enough that you'd notice if something was wrong within 24 hours. You know roughly what your checking balance is at any given time. You can ballpark your investment account within a few $1,000s. You're not obsessive about it. You're just aware. Researchers at Princeton and Harvard have documented what financial avoidance does to cognitive function. People under chronic financial stress show measurable reductions in mental bandwidth. They make worse decisions. They tunnel into short-term survival mode. They can't think strategically because their brains are too busy managing anxiety. The simple act of regular neutral observation of your own finances breaks that cycle. You see the numbers, so the numbers stop feeling abstract. Awareness is the foundation that everything else gets built on. If you've developed this habit, you've already done something most people will never do. You've made your financial life visible to yourself. That visibility is what makes every other smart decision possible. $500 a month, redirected toward investments at 8% over 30 years, grows to roughly $750,000. None of that compounding happens for the person who refuses to look at their accounts because they're too scared of what they might find. The second sign is that you can name most of your recurring charges from memory. Subscription services, streaming platforms, apps with monthly fees, storage services, the little $10 charges that hit your account every month, and quietly siphon away money most people forget they're spending. According to research from C+R Research, the average American thinks they spend about $86 per month on subscriptions. The actual number is closer to $219 per month. That's a $133 gap between perception and reality every single month. Over a year, that's nearly $1,600 vanishing into services people don't even remember signing up for. You're not in that gap. When someone asks what you pay each month for streaming, you can rattle off the list. When a free trial is about to convert to a paid subscription, you remember to cancel it. When a service raises its price, you notice. You either accept the new price consciously or you cancel. Either response is fine. The point is that you make the decision deliberately rather than letting the company decide for you through your inattention. This single habit, knowing what you're paying for, often saves $1,200 to $2,000 annually. $2,000 a year invested at 8% over 25 years grows to roughly $146,000. The subscription audit isn't trivial. It's one of the highest leverage financial habits available to anyone with a checking account. The third sign is that you've automated your saving before you ever see the money. This is the structural difference that separates people who consistently build wealth from people who consistently intend to. The intention crowd waits until the end of the month, looks at what's left, and saves whatever happens to remain. The structural crowd takes saving off the table entirely. The transfer happens on payday. The money moves to a separate account before lifestyle has a chance to consume it. You can't spend what you can't see. The Vanguard How America Saves report from 2025 found that the average 401k contribution rate sits at 7.7%. Combined with employer matches, the average total savings rate hits roughly 14.2%, according to Fidelity's third quarter 2025 data. 88% of 401k participants receive an employer match. If you're capturing that match, you're already doing something the bottom 40% of American workers fail to do consistently. You've turned your future into a non-negotiable line item, the same way rent or a car payment functions. Future you gets paid before present you gets to make decisions. $500 a month at 8% over 30 years compounds to roughly $745,000. $1,000 a month at the same rate over the same period compounds to nearly $1.5 million. The automation does the work. You don't have to remember. You don't have to decide. The decision was made once, and now it executes itself indefinitely. Let me pause here for a moment because something needs to be said directly. None of what I'm describing is financial advice. I don't know your specific situation. I don't know your income, your debts, your family obligations, or your goals. What I'm describing is a pattern of behaviors observed across people who consistently build wealth across decades. Whether those behaviors fit your life is something only you can determine. The point is not to follow these signs as instructions. The point is to recognize when you're already doing the smart thing so you can stop second-guessing yourself. The fourth sign is that you drive a car that's at least 5 years old, or you've optimized your transportation in some other way that doesn't drain your monthly cash flow. The average monthly payment on a new vehicle hit $767 at the end of 2025, according to Experian's State of the Automotive Finance Market report. That's $9,204 annually before insurance, gas, maintenance, registration, and depreciation. More than 20% of new car buyers now commit to monthly payments exceeding $1,000. Total U.S. auto loan debt has climbed past $1.65 trillion. You sidestepped this entire arena. Maybe you bought a 5-year-old Honda or Toyota for $15,000 cash. Maybe you're driving a paid-off car you've owned for a decade. Maybe you live somewhere that lets you skip car ownership altogether. Whatever the specific configuration, you've made transportation a utility rather than a status symbol. Research from Thomas Stanley, the author of The Millionaire Next Door, found that the median price millionaires pay for their cars is $31,367. An Experian automotive study found that 61% of people earning over $250,000 drive Hondas, Toyotas, or Fords. The actually wealthy understand something the visibly wealthy refuse to learn. Cars are depreciating assets. Every dollar locked into transportation status is a dollar that can't compound elsewhere. The difference between a $700 car payment and a paid-off used car invested instead at 8% over 25 years is roughly $660,000. That's the price tag on looking new. You've decided you're not paying it. The fifth sign is subtle but powerful. You can say the phrase, "That's not in my budget right now," without feeling the need to explain, justify, or apologize for it. Most people experience profound social discomfort when their financial limits become visible. They'll go into debt to avoid the embarrassment of declining a dinner invitation. They'll attend bachelor and bachelorette parties they can't afford because saying no feels like admitting failure. They'll match the spending of friends who earn double what they earn because the alternative feels too revealing. You've moved past that. Somewhere along the way, you decided that protecting your future was more important than protecting your image. When the group dinner is happening at a restaurant you don't want to spend money at, you suggest somewhere else or you skip it. When the destination wedding is in a city that requires flights and hotels you can't justify, you send a thoughtful gift and stay home. When the friends of friends weekend trip would cost $1,200 you'd rather invest, you politely decline. The peace this creates is enormous. Every social pressure point that destabilizes other people's finances slides off you because you've removed the underlying anxiety. You're not afraid of looking like you don't have the money. You're not auditioning for anyone's approval. The boundary itself becomes invisible after a while. People stop pressuring you because they sense you're not negotiable. Friendships that survive this filter because they're no longer transactional. Friendships that don't survive it weren't real to begin with. The sixth sign concerns something most people never even think to question. You don't update your stated income when banks send you those friendly little pop-ups asking you to keep your information current. You recognize the pop-up for what it is, a request, not a requirement. The bank wants fresh data because fresh data lets their algorithms optimize against you more precisely. Higher reported income triggers more aggressive marketing for premium products with annual fees you don't need. It triggers credit limit increases designed to enable spending you didn't ask for. It triggers what banking insiders call ability to pay pricing, which is exactly what it sounds like. Customers who can pay more get charged more, regardless of their actual risk profile. You decline to feed the algorithm. You let your old income data sit there, gradually decaying in usefulness while the bank loses precision in how it targets you. This is a form of leverage most people don't realize they have. The information asymmetry between you and your bank is enormous in their favor by default. Every detail you decline to volunteer reduces that asymmetry by a tiny amount. Over years, this small refusal compounds into meaningfully different treatment. The seventh sign reveals itself in your housing decision. You bought less house than the bank approved you for, or you're renting in a way that gives you flexibility instead of stretching for ownership. According to the Atlanta Fed's Housing Ownership Affordability Monitor, the median household now spends close to 48% of their income just to own a median-priced home. 48%. That's nearly half of every dollar earned going to a single line item. You looked at the numbers and made a different choice. Maybe you bought a $350,000 house when the bank approved you for $550,000. Maybe you stayed in a perfectly comfortable rental for years longer than your peers thought made sense. The difference between stretching for the bigger house and staying in the smaller one creates breathing room across every other financial decision you make. $2,000 a month in housing, cost difference invested at 8% over 25 years, grows to roughly $1,800,000. That's the actual price tag on the upgraded kitchen and the extra bedroom you would have slowly stopped noticing within 18 months. The smaller house didn't make you smaller, it made you free. Let me introduce you to someone who illustrates how these signs combine in real life. Her name is Janelle. She's 34 years old, lives in Atlanta, works as a project manager earning $78,000. Annually, walk into her one-bedroom apartment and you'd see nothing remarkable. Modest furniture she's had for years, a laptop on the kitchen table where she works from home twice a week, a 6-year-old Honda Civic in the parking lot. Janelle has roughly $142,000 across her retirement and brokerage accounts. She has 11 months of expenses in a high-yield savings account, earning 4.2% annually. She has 0 credit card debt. Her colleagues assume she's doing okay, but probably not great. Her colleagues who earn the same as Janelle and drive newer cars and live in nicer apartments are mostly 2 paychecks away from financial crisis. Janelle isn't smarter than they are in any conventional sense. She's not better at her job. She didn't go to a more prestigious school. She just developed a different set of habits. The compounding has been quietly working in her favor for the last 8 years, while her peers have been compounding in the opposite direction. The 8th sign is that you measure raises by what you save, not what you spend. When most people get a raise, the money disappears within 2 months into upgraded lifestyle. The slightly nicer apartment, the new car payment, the upgraded restaurants, the more expensive vacations, the better wardrobe. Within a quarter, the higher income feels normal, and the same financial stress returns at a higher baseline. You handle raises differently. When your income goes up, you bank the difference. The $5,000 raise becomes $5,000 added to your investment contributions. The promotion that bumps you from $75,000 to $90,000 becomes $15,000 more flowing into wealth building accounts annually. Your lifestyle stays roughly the same while your financial position changes dramatically. This single habit, what behavioral economists sometimes call lifestyle anchoring, separates people who eventually escape the income treadmill from people who run on it forever. Goldman Sachs research found that 41% of Americans earning between $300,000 and $500,000 annually live paycheck to paycheck. 40% of those earning over $500,000 report the same. These aren't people who lack the income to build wealth. They're people whose lifestyle inflated to consume every dollar of income growth. You're operating from a different rule book. Each raise widens the gap between what you earn and what you spend. The widening gap is where wealth gets manufactured. $15,000 a year added to investments at 8% over 20 years compounds to roughly $700,000. That's one promotion handled correctly. The 9th sign is that you understand the difference between gross income and free cash flow, and you make decisions based on the second number. Most people anchor their self-image to their salary. They think of themselves as a $100,000 earner or a $60,000 earner, and they spend as if that gross figure is theirs to deploy. The real number is much smaller. After federal taxes, state taxes, FICA health insurance premiums, retirement contributions, and the genuinely fixed costs of being alive, the discretionary money that actually exists is often less than half of gross. Someone earning $90,000 in gross income might have $1,700 per month of genuinely free cash flow after housing, food, transportation, insurance, and minimum savings. That $1,700 is the only money that's truly available for discretionary spending. You operate from that smaller, more accurate number. When you evaluate whether you can afford something, you're not comparing it to your salary. You're comparing it to your free cash flow. This produces a completely different relationship with purchases. The $800 weekend trip doesn't represent a small fraction of your gross income. It represents almost half of 1 month's discretionary capacity. Suddenly, the math feels more honest. The friction you naturally apply to discretionary spending isn't restraint, it's accuracy. Most people operate on inflated numbers and wonder why their accounts never grow. You operate on the real number and watch the accounts grow steadily, because the math was never lying to you in the first place. I want to pause again here because there's something worth saying about the cumulative weight of what we've covered so far. Every sign on this list operates by the same underlying mechanism. You've removed certain decisions from the realm of willpower and placed them inside structures that produce good outcomes by default. The morning glance at accounts isn't willpower. It's habit. The automatic transfer isn't willpower. It's automation. The ability to say no isn't willpower. It's identity. Willpower fluctuates with stress, sleep, and emotion. Structure persists. The signs of financial intelligence are mostly signs that someone has built systems that work even on bad days. Most people are trying to make good decisions one at a time, every day, with a brain that's tired and stressed and pulled in 15 directions. You're letting structure do the work so your tired, stressed brain doesn't have to. The 10th sign is that you're slightly embarrassed by how plain your life looks compared to your income. This is a quiet hallmark of people who are genuinely building wealth. Their lifestyle visibly understates their financial position. They earn more than their friends would guess. They save more than their lifestyle suggests is possible. The Ramsey Solutions Millionaire Study found that 94% of millionaires live below their means. 80% are first-generation affluent, meaning they didn't inherit their wealth. 88% are self-made. Most of them lived in middle-class neighborhoods while building their wealth, drove practical cars, and looked nothing like the cultural caricature of what a wealthy person should look like. If your friends regularly ask why you don't upgrade your apartment, why you still drive that car, why you don't take more elaborate vacations, take it as a compliment. The gap between your life's appearance and your life's substance is exactly where compounding lives. The visible life takes 1 or 2 years to upgrade after every income increase. The invisible life builds permanently in the background. Eventually, the invisible life becomes so substantial that the visible life feels almost irrelevant. By then, the people who've been judging your modest lifestyle are still grinding away at jobs they can't afford to leave because their visible lives consumed the option to leave. You've quietly built optionality. They've quietly built obligations. The same income produced opposite outcomes because the mathematics of where the money flowed were entirely different. The 11th sign is something almost nobody talks about, even in financial circles obsessed with optimization. You've stopped trying to maximize your investment returns and started focusing almost exclusively on increasing your savings rate. This is the move that separates people who understand wealth building from people who are still pretending to. Here's why it matters. The returns on your investments are largely outside your control. The market does what the market does. Over long periods, broadly diversified index funds have historically returned somewhere around 8 to 10% annually. You can't reliably beat that through stock picking. Most professional fund managers can't either. The difference between an 8% return and a 10% return on a small portfolio is meaningful, but bounded. The difference between a 5% savings rate and a 25% savings rate is enormous and entirely within your control. Someone earning $75,000 who saves 5% puts away $3,750 a year. Someone with the same income saving 25% puts away $18,750. Over 30 years at the same 8% return, the first person ends up with roughly $460,000. The second person ends up with roughly $2.3 million. The investment return was identical. The savings rate produced a 5-fold difference in outcome. This is what most financial content gets backwards. Hours of energy go into picking the right fund, debating asset allocation, optimizing tax strategies, when the single biggest lever, the percentage of income you save, gets treated as an afterthought. You've inverted that. You spend your energy on what you can control. The market will do whatever it does. Your savings rate is entirely yours. Optimizing the controllable variable is so much higher leverage than optimizing the uncontrollable one that the comparison isn't even close. Almost nobody figures this out. The people who do tend to build wealth at rates that look almost magical from the outside. The 12th and final sign is the most philosophical, and it's the one that ties everything else together. You've started to measure wealth by the number of no's you can afford to say. This reframe changes the entire game. Most people measure wealth by what they have: the car, the house, the watches, the experiences, the visible markers of accumulation. You've moved to a different metric. Wealth is the number of situations in which you can say no without consequence. No to the toxic boss. No to the destination wedding you can't justify. No to the family request that would deplete your savings. No to the relationship that demands financial obligations beyond your comfort. No to the housing market when prices are absurd. No to the career path everyone expects you to follow. Each no requires financial margin. The person living paycheck to paycheck has almost no no's available to them. Every situation in their life arrives with implicit pressure to say yes, because saying no would create immediate hardship. Their boss knows it, their landlord knows it, their family knows it. The whole structure of their life was built on the assumption that they couldn't afford to walk away from any of it. You've built a different structure. You can walk away from things. You can refuse things. You can wait for things to be right rather than accepting them, because the alternative is too painful. The 11 months of expenses Janelle has in her high-yield savings account isn't just emergency money. It's no money. It's the ability to leave a job, end a relationship, move to a new city, or start something new without the timeline being dictated by financial desperation. Real wealth, ultimately, is freedom of refusal. Everything else is just the mechanism that produces the freedom. The investments are infrastructure. The savings rate is process. The boring habits are scaffolding. What they actually build is the right to live a life shaped by your own decisions rather than other people's pressure. That right is invisible to outsiders. They see the modest car and the simple apartment, and they assume you're middle of the pack. They don't see what you've actually purchased with all those years of restraint. You've been buying no's. You can say no to almost anything now. That's the real outcome of financial intelligence. Nothing else comes close. Let me bring this back to where we started. You wake up before the alarm. You glance at 3 numbers. You go about your day. From the outside, your life doesn't look like much. You haven't upgraded your apartment in years. Your car doesn't impress anyone. Your wardrobe is functional rather than aspirational. Your social media presence is sparse. None of this looks like wealth. All of it is wealth. The signs we've walked through aren't a checklist for becoming financially smart. They're a mirror for recognizing that you already are. If you saw yourself in 7 or 8 or 10 of these, you're operating in a way that puts you in the top fraction of American adults, regardless of your current account balance. The accounts will catch up. Compounding is patient. The behaviors are what matters because the behaviors are what produces the accounts. Most people will never develop these habits. They'll spend their lives running on the income treadmill, getting raises that don't change their financial position, buying cars that drain their cash flow, paying interest to banks that profit from their inattention, saying yes to things they can't afford because they don't want to look like they're failing. You're walking a different path. The path looks slow from the outside. It feels slow from the inside. But the slowness is an illusion created by daily granularity. When you zoom out to a 5 or 10 or 20-year horizon, the path you're on bends toward outcomes the other path can never reach. Here's what's worth understanding as we close. Financial intelligence isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a practice you keep returning to. The signs we walked through today describe behaviors at this stage of your life. The behaviors that matter at 35 aren't quite the same as the behaviors that matter at 25. The traps that catch people in their 40s are different from the traps that catch people in their 20s. The decisions that compound in your 50s are different from the decisions that compound in your 30s. Every decade has its own pressures, its own pitfalls, its own opportunities, its own irreversible windows. The smartest financial minds I've encountered have something in common. They study the territory before they walk through it. They learn what mistakes happen at each life stage before they reach that stage. They map the landscape so they can recognize the traps when those traps appear in their path. Most financial mistakes don't happen because people don't know what's right. They happen because people didn't see what was coming until they were already inside it. The decisions that quietly determine retirement outcomes are mostly made in the decades before retirement, often without people realizing what they were deciding. The car payment in your 30s, the house upgrade in your 40s, the lifestyle inflation that quietly normalizes itself in your 50s. None of it announces itself as a defining moment while it's happening. It only becomes visible in retrospect, usually too late to change. Anyone serious about financial literacy Anyone genuinely committed to staying in the smartest fraction of their generation would want to see every trap that exists at every age laid out in advance. Not because they expect to fall into all of them, because seeing them coming is the entire game. That kind of map, the one that walks through every age and every trap and every irreversible window before you encounter them, is the foundation that everything we discussed today rests on. The 12 signs are the result. The map is the cause. Most people skip the map and then wonder why the result never came together. The ones who study the map first tend to find that the signs we walk through develop almost on their own. Wealth is mostly the slow accumulation of right answers to questions you saw coming. The questions you didn't see coming are the ones that catch you. Seeing them coming changes everything.